Now, here's Amy Demboski.
Welcome back to the Amy Demboski Show here on KVNT. If you'd like to call in, be part of the show, the number is 357-5868. It's 31 degrees under cloudy skies out here in the valley. I'm very excited to have our next candidate on. His name is Gregory Jones. He's running for State House District 8, and we always say we invite all candidates to come on. Our job is not to tell you who to vote for, but we will, obviously, we'll tell you our opinion. But our job is to give them an audience so they can get their message out to you, and you, the voter, can make a determination on who best fits you and who has earned your vote. So with that, I am excited to introduce you to Greg Jones. Hey, Greg, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing just great. How are you?
I am well. Do you go by Greg or Gregory?
Oh, Greg is fine.
Oh, wonderful. Well, it's great to meet you. So you're a candidate for District 8, which is out near Big Lake, right?
Yeah. Settlers Bay, down KGB, Big Lake, Meadow Lakes, out Palmer Highway.
Oh,
Park Highway.
Perfect. Well, our typical introduction for candidates, I'll just tell you how we typically set it up, is we usually just get to know you, the first segment, and then the second segment kind of get into policy questions. So just tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been in Alaska? A little bit about your background.
I'm going on 8 years now in Alaska. Sort of came to Alaska during the Great Recession, and came up here for some opportunity. I'm an IBEW electrician, so got to work up here. Went out on the pipeline, and really had a great experience out there. Certified engineer, master electrician for over 25 years now, and a former contractor, so I know about small business and how important that is to opportunity in America. And been a long time civil rights and human rights activist, currently with the Anchorage NAACP. Also an alumni with the Anchorage Citizens Police Academy. Mm-hmm. And I've worked with the Chaplains Association as a chaplain with the Anchorage Police and Fire Chaplains Association. These are some of the highlights of my community service and some of the good relationships that I've been building since my time here in Alaska.
Well, that's a lot to pack into 8 years. Where did you move up from?
Actually, South Carolina, right in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, my dad's from Eastern Kentucky, so I have to tell you that the further south you go, it feels like home to me sometimes because I used to spend a lot of time down there as a kid. So tell us about your family. Do you have family up here in Alaska with you?
Oh, yeah. My wife and I have been married for 31 years now. We have 8 children. Most of my children are married. Right now, we only have 2 children at home. I have one daughter that's studying abroad, and the other 4 children are married. We've got 11 grandchildren, actually.
Oh, congratulations. That's wonderful. Well, you're running for what? Okay, before we get into the actual race, what in the world possessed you? You're like me. What drove you to want to run for elected office here in Alaska?
Well, like I said, I have a long history of activism. I like to, be involved in what's going on and sort of let my voice be heard and try to help the people. I'm a people person, like I said, organized labor. I came up as an electrician and got involved in the labor movement. So that's a big passion of mine. Labor rights, fair pay. These are some of the major things that mean a lot to me. And I'd like to really help people gain these things.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. And, full disclosure, I'll just say this right up front because we've never met in person, I don't think. Actually, this is the first time we get to talk. Hopefully it won't be our last. Okay. But my husband's, he's a firefighter, an Anchorage firefighter. So he's a member of a labor union too. So, full disclosure, I'm not anti-labor at all because we have family members that are. But when we start talking about the different issues that affect Alaska, and we start talking about, obviously my last guest was on, we were talking a lot about the budget, and whether you're on a city level or state level, typically labor accounts for a good 80% of the budget because we are a human capital, right? So when we start talking about the cost, in this economic time, and the cost of labor, especially here in Alaska, is really high. What do you see the role of labor in those labor relations being?
Well, my experience with labor is that I've seen major concessions given by labor to help companies to be competitive and to, at the same time, of course, to maintain a decent standard of living for the workers that they're representing. So there has to be a balance, and safety. One of the major components of the labor movement has been the safety and well-being of the worker, the health care, and even having a decent retirement. So did that answer your question?
Yeah. No, you're going in the right direction. Now, let me ask you this. So obviously, I haven't said this yet, but you're a registered Democrat running in the general election, and your challenger, I believe, is Mark Newman, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, this is going to kind of frame it for people who they get to choose, and I think both of you come from trade industries. I think he was a carpenter. But if you were to see a right-to-work legislation out there, would you support right-to-work legislation, or is that something that you're not really interested in?
Well, I really believe that workers need the ability to bargain collectively because oftentimes, you're totally at the mercy of the company and what they want to do when they want to change policy. So that is a major thing that I stand for, is the right of people to collectively bargain.
Sure. Now, let me ask you this: Do you see that differently with public sector unions? Because there's been some discussions. Alaska, we have a huge amount of labor unions in Alaska. It's a very, very strong labor state, to actually even being what people call a red state. But some people make a differentiation between public unions and private unions. Do you see it that way, or do you kind of see it like all employees should have a right to unionize?
Well, like I said, I'm part of the Anchorage Citizens Police Academy alumni, so I support the police. They have the hardest job that I can think of. I definitely believe that, financial pressures at home should not be, or even the health care. They deserve the best compensation for the work that they do. So when you're talking about police officers, you're talking about school teachers. I understand, I just heard a statistic yesterday. They said that the average school teacher's pay was about $50,000, but that's not a lot of money to live on here in Alaska. So I want to make sure that our school teachers do have enough money to survive and have a decent standard of living so that they can do a better job.
Well, we appreciate you sharing your perspective. All right, so I believe we have a caller that's coming in, but we're coming up against the break here in just a minute. So on the next side of the break, you're going to hold with us, but on the other side of the break, when we come back, we'll start talking about some of the policy decisions and issues that came up in this last legislative session. And just to kind of get you thinking about it, what I'll ask you about is about the budget, what you thought about the budget. There was some legislation that was up that Governor Walker put forward regarding how to deal with the budget gap and the permanent fund. We'll ask you about that. We'll ask you about the crime bill. And then we'll talk about maybe some other questions. If we have callers, you're more than welcome to call in, 357-5868. We're talking with Gregory Jones. He's a candidate for State House, and that's District 8, which is the Big Lake, Meadow Lakes District. And he will be facing off against Representative Mark Newman in the general election. Stay with us. You're listening to the Amy Demboski Show here on KVNT.
This is the Amy Demboski Show on the Talk of the Valley, KVNT. 1020 AM and 92.5 FM, and live online at 1020kdnt.com. If you want to join the conversation, call 357-5868. That's 357-5868. Now, here's Amy Demboski.
Welcome back to the Amy Demboski Show here on KVNT. You are listening live and local. We have House candidate Greg Jones on. He is from District 8. He's a Democrat running in the general election. And I thought we had a caller for him, but apparently we don't. So we're going to go right back to the policy questions. Greg, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Well, we appreciate you joining us. And I always think it's important to have a community show in which we can clearly and candidly discuss the issues and the candidates get a voice and you actually get your position out there. So as you talk, you'll notice a lot I don't interrupt because I want to hear what you have to say. And I think it's important for every one of us listening to do the same so they can make up their minds. So the first thing let's talk about, because this legislative session was laced with all kinds of controversial pieces of legislation. We'll start with SB 128. That was the bill that restructured the permanent fund. Can you tell us what your thoughts were on that and if you would have supported it?
Well, I did my own little straw poll of people in my district, and some people said that they felt like we as citizens should contribute to balancing the budget by contributing or be willing to contribute part of our permanent fund dividend. Other people expressed that money is vital, especially in these tough economic times when people have lost their jobs right here in Alaska. A lot of people are counting on that money. But I really think that it was such a crucial or such a difficult position that the legislature, the Republican-led legislature, has gotten into this pickle where Governor Walker, I guess after 5 sessions, the legislature, the finance committee, who my opponent is the co-chair,
Co-chair of finance, yes, he is.
Yeah, Mark Newman is the co-chair of the finance committee, and they could not produce a budget that would pass and that was acceptable. So, they failed. They failed to do their job. The Republican-led legislature failed to do their job, and so in an effort, after all of the cuts and slashes of all the government programs and everything, they had to come to this. So I think that it was a tough call, and I would have done everything I could to save, because I understand that there was other options.
Right.
There could have been a way to save the PFD.
Let me ask you a little different way. So, would you support an income tax?
Oh, well, to be honest with you, I've lived and worked in several parts of the country, and I've always had to pay an income tax. I think that would be a stable source of income for Alaskans. There's ways to this would help to the people who come from out of state and work in Alaska would be able to contribute to the Alaskan economy with an income tax, and even I think having an income tax in the state would reduce your federal income tax burden. So for that reason, and just to help with the Alaskan economy, I do support a limited state income tax.
Okay. Well, what about Governor Walker when he vetoed half of the permanent fund this year, and essentially he capped it right at just above $1,000? Would you have supported that veto of the permanent fund?
I would have tried to find some other ways. I've talked to some of the members of the legislature, and they said that there were some other options. So I would not have supported that method of slashing the permanent fund. Okay,
well, the last kind of policy question I'll ask you about, and then we're going to switch gears a little bit, is the gas line. Have you been following the Alaska gas line? What do you think about that, and do you support it?
Well, I've worked on the oil pipeline, and I'm in the engineering field, so I am fascinated by industrial development, and I am excited about the possibilities of a new gas line and the prospects of new jobs for Alaskans to help to help Alaskans with their finances. So I do support the new gas line. I do, yes. Okay.
Well, and I forgot because I actually was reading your website, and in there you talk a lot about social justice and the work that you've done. So, did you follow SB 91, the crime bill? Would you have supported the crime bill that passed this last legislative session?
I do support criminal justice reform, and I am not opposed to the way that it came out, but I think more needs to be done to help with the drug epidemic that we're having. We can't just let people out on the streets. We have to treat these people, the mentally ill and the people who are addicted to drugs. All of this weight is falling on the police. The police cannot handle the people who are mentally ill and those who are addicted to drugs. So more has to be done. I mean, I know funding has to come. I think there's some federal funding available because I've actually, I've volunteered over in my house where they try to help the homeless and people who are addicted to drugs and with some job training. And I've consulted with Del Waters down in Anchorage at the Alaska Work Source Project. And so I support these initiatives. I myself, I teach the electrical trade as well. So I'm looking to help people get on their feet, stop the crime, get reform, get treatment. These are the things that I support.
Well, we appreciate that perspective. Can I ask, did you serve in the military?
I haven't.
Oh, okay. Sorry. For some reason, I thought you had. But, we appreciate those who give back to the community. I'm huge in volunteering. I think it's a massive, it's part of our community. It really is the fabric of our community, and it brings us all together, and it helps build others up, and I think it's great. So we definitely appreciate that. Now, I have to ask you this, and I'm sure you're not going to be surprised too much, but I have never had a legislative candidate on, or anybody actually in legislative office that has actually made national news. And I'm sure you've seen the article. There was an article coming from WorldNet Daily, which I don't know too much about them, but they were talking about you as a Bernie Sanders delegate, and they made some pretty staunch allegations in there. Do you know the article I'm talking about?
Yeah. That
What's
group
that about?
That group is affiliated with a hate group. They're part of a hate group network. What they call the Southern Poverty Law Center listed that group and some of those others that were slandering me because they didn't want me to be allowed to come into the DNC. I was a Bernie delegate, duly elected here in Anchorage as a national delegate.
So let me
clean record.
Sure. Let me just tell people what we're talking about. So there was this article out that it looked like it was actually done through the Clarion Project, and it talks about your involvement with Muslims of America, and I don't know if Kara was involved in that, but can you just talk to us a little bit about your relationship with those groups, and also a little bit, we might have to hold you over to the next segment because this is fascinating to me. I would really love to know, with your perspective as a Muslim American, how those experiences are going to help serve you in the legislature and maybe bring a different perspective. Do you mind holding over one more segment?
I would love to.
Wonderful. Folks, we're talking with Gregory Jones. He is a candidate for District 8, which is the Big Lake District. It also has part of Point McKenzie and Meadow Lake. So if you're in that area, you're going to want to listen so we can get his contact information. You can contact him, look him up on his website as well. And it'll give you one more option when you go to vote on November 8th. You're listening to the Amy Demboski Show here on KVNT. We'll be right back. The number, 357-5868.
This is the Amy Demboski Show on the Talk of the Valley, KVNT, 1020 AM and 92.5 FM, and live online at 1020kdnt.com. From 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, join Amy Demboski to talk about what matters to Alaskans. The phone lines are open at 357-5868, 357-5868. Good afternoon, Alaska. Here's Amy Demboski.
Good afternoon, Alaska. It is a glorious 31 degrees and cloudy out here in the mighty Mat-Su. We are online talking with House District 8 candidate Gregory Jones. He is running in the general election. His challenger will be Representative Mark Newman, who's running as a Republican. Greg's a Democrat. But we do appreciate him calling in and talking to us and sharing his perspective. I think it's important that voters have an educated choice and they know who their candidates are and they get a chance to ask questions. So if you'd like to call in and ask Greg questions, you can. The number is 357-5868. So, Greg, thank you so much for holding over with us. So let's just get back to this for a second. So I don't know a lot about a lot of the different groups that are out there, whether they're Christian or Muslim or whatever. I'm not one of those that studies this intricately. But with respect to like CARE or Muslims of America, what relationship do you have with these groups? And kind of explain to us how your experience in the legislature will bring kind of a different perspective and how it might serve the people of District 8.
Well, yeah, I'm not CARE. I'm not affiliated with them at all. I've met the leader of that group at the DNC.
Oh, okay.
He was at the Democratic National Convention, and so that's where I met him. But I don't know him personally, and I've just read some of their stuff. They're like an advocacy group for the rights, because you know what's happened. You know the hatred and the racism that's been growing in America. You know, a lot. I mean, I don't know why the national news doesn't cover this, but there's black churches being burned. There's mosques being attacked. And so I know the CARE reports on these things, and they try to get some publicity out there about Muslims being attacked. That's what I know them for. You know, I'm not a member of that or anything. You know, Muslims in America, you know, I was born in Washington, D.C., 1966, okay? And, you know, my father and my two uncles became Muslim back in 1971. I was 5 years old, okay? And so my family has been Muslim. I got half of my family is Muslim, half of my family is Christian. We're, you know, Native American descent, African American.
It sounds like a good old American family, a little bit of everything. So what is Muslims of America, is it a group that has like, you know, like chapters around the country? I'm not familiar with them very much.
Well, that's what I'm trying to explain to you, that since that time, since the civil rights struggle with, you know, Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, the civil rights struggle, you know, if anybody studies how even at they call it post-civil rights struggle, you know, what happened, how did the African-American community develop throughout the 70s, throughout the 80s, and throughout the 90s, and up to today? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a living example of that. I was born in 1966, and so, you know, my family has been growing, and we're Muslims of America. That's the name of the organization. And, you know, these are American Muslims from New York, Philadelphia, D.C. You know, I mean, that's my, you know, I'm from the East Coast. But they've all over California, all over the country, there's American Muslims that have been, you know, families growing since the 50s and 60s. But you just don't see it, especially up here in Alaska. You don't see that. But if you go to Los Angeles or anywhere else, or, you know, any major city, you're going to see American Muslims that's been, you know, does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, it sort of does. So you obviously are a member of Muslims of America, but now I'm scrolling down and I'm looking at a different article, and this one is an article from from PamelaGeller.com. And as I'm looking at it, it says that Muslims of America has rebranded, but they used to be called Jamaat Ul-Fuqra. I'm probably saying that wrong, which has been linked to terrorism. And so I'm just curious. I mean, first of all,
I'm glad you're asking this. Okay?
Yeah, I just don't understand. I don't know. So I'd love to hear it.
Pamela Geller, I understand her to be one of the biggest fearmongers and Islamophobes in the country. And she is actually listed among the hate mongers in America and the sowing seeds of hate. So, now the Muslims of America, whatever the history was back in the 60s or the 70s and 80s, I was a little baby back then, but I know that they do not allow any criminal activity. They are working closely with the FBI and local authorities. I myself work closely with the authorities right here in Anchorage. I'm a Police Citizens Academy alumni. I'm a chaplain with the Chaplain Association. And so we do nothing but try to promote peace and understanding among people.
Well, we appreciate your service.
And it's so important because I think, like I said, here in Alaska, you just don't get that perspective. If you watch TV, you're going to see, you might see you go to Chicago and, you just see such all the crime. You see crime.
The only experience I've ever had with Muslim Americans is, I've been in healthcare for 18 years, and I had the opportunity. I've had a lot of patients, actually, that were Muslim, nicest people I've ever met. And so I really haven't ever had a negative experience. But I know when it comes to care, I have information here. I'm glad to hear you said you're not a member of CARE because, when you're looking at the Holy Land Foundation and all these different cases that have come forward, even the United Arab Emirates lists CARE as a terrorist organization. So I'm glad to know you're not a member of them. But again, this is one of those things that I think is interesting. And tell us a little bit, we only have about 2 minutes left, but where can people get more information? First of all, let's get that out right away. And then I want to talk a little tiny bit about your experience that you could bring to the legislature.
Okay, well, so where can people get more information about me? Me and my
absolutely.
campaign?
Your campaign, if they want to contact you.
Yeah, well, my website is G.I. Jones for House, .com.
Uh-huh.
And my email address is GregoryJonesAlaska@gmail.
Perfect.
Okay.
Greg,
and I'd be more than happy to discuss these issues with anybody because it needs to be clarified.
Well, we appreciate it. We're right up against a hard break. Do you want to hold on for one more segment?
Yes, I'm available.
Okay. Folks, we're talking with Greg Jones, 357-5868. We'll be right back.
I'm not afraid of the dark. If we gotta live in the dark, we will live in the dark. Won't see me dying in the light. We will live in the dark.
This is the Amy Demboski Show on the Talk of the Valley, KVNT, 1020 AM and 92.5 FM, and live online at 1020kvnt.com. If you want to join the conversation, call 357-5868. That's 357-5868. Now, here's Amy Demboski.
Welcome back to the Amy Demboski Show here on KVNT. If you'd like to call in, be part of the show, the number is 357-5868. Justin, is Doug on the line? He wants to make an announcement real quick. Is he there? Hey, Doug.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Amy. My car radio went dead on me, so I have no idea what the topic is. But I did have to call in on our benefit for the Palmer Library. It's this Sunday.
Uh-huh.
October 23rd, Matsu Orchestra. It's a free concert at the Palmer Train Depot. It starts at 3 p.m.
Oh, perfect. So Sunday, 10/23 at the Palmer Train Depot. It'll be an orchestra performance, and it'll benefit the Palmer Library.
Correct, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we appreciate that. Thanks for the plug, Doug.
Okay, you bet.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. All right, folks, we are talking with Gregory Jones. Justin, I don't know if you ever noticed, but I always am fascinated by people that I don't necessarily always line up with. So I'm fascinated by it because I love to hear other perspectives. If you'd like to call in and ask Greg a question, the number is 357-5868. You can also get more information about Greg at his website. It's gijonesforhouse.com. That's gijonesforhouse.com. And you can also contact him, and he'd love to answer your questions. Greg, are you still there?
I am.
Oh, wonderful. All right, so we have a caller for you. Let me just ask, before we take the caller, let me ask you a quick question. So with your experiences, obviously, with different, your background, whether it's in labor or whether it's in your community service or whether it's between Muslim relations in the community, how do you see that translating into legislative service?
Well, I mean, the legislature is supposed to be representative of the people. There should be diversity to represent the various people that we have. Of course, we say that Anchorage and Alaska is, like the most diverse state in the union and one of the most diverse places in the world. So that needs to reflect in the legislature so that these various groups have someone that can relate to them and represent them, and so they can feel a part of America and to be you have so many people.
Well, I think yes, absolutely, and I think you're striking a chord with many because our phone calls are lining up. So we're gonna take a question for you. First, we'll go to DJ. Hey, DJ.
Hey, Amy, how you doing today?
Good. Hey, do you have a question for Greg?
Hey, yeah, I did catch the last segment. Hey, Greg, how are you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Good. Hey, Greg, listen, now, I got a little bit of a background. I come from the military side, and more importantly, I come off the intel side. And probably last but not least, I used to be the director of anti-terrorism down for Air Force Special Operations Command. I have a question for you because in one of our reports, in the 2007 FBI report, there was Muslims of America was actually documented as having a propensity for violence by that organization and the leadership that extolled its memberships, or its members, I should say, to a policy of jihad or holy war. So before we go too much farther, I want to make sure I hear from you that that is not your belief, that you believe in U.S. laws, not in the Sharia law, and certainly not in the law of jihad, as is routed out, as the FBI found out and reported in 2007.
All right, thanks for the question. We'll hang up and we'll let Greg answer. Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, well, let me start off by saying that I'm not a spokesperson for the Muslims of the Americas, but no, my personal belief and what my faith teaches me is that we're all children of God, that we have to follow the laws of our country. We have to respect our neighbors. This is biblical. This is from our faith. Respect your neighbors, love thy neighbor as thyself. These are the things. And so that 2007, that sounds like a long time ago. I mean, almost 10 years. But from what I know, the group is working with the authorities. That's what I know. I know that I've been working with the authorities up here, and as far as I know, I've seen pictures of the group and the head people of the group with the FBI. They come to the properties and participate.
So to go back to DJ's question, and we'll move on because you have another caller. But to go back to DJ's question, this is interesting because it might actually come up in the legislative session because I believe Representative Laura Reinbold had a bill that was basically an anti-Sharia bill. Let's put it that way. It was you won't put Sharia above the U.S. Constitution. So that I think that's what DJ was asking you is, do you believe in Sharia law, or would you support the U.S. Constitution above that?
Okay, let me explain something without getting into too much detail. Okay, the Sharia law it can be equated to the 10 Commandments. Okay, so just the same way that Christians believe in the 10 Commandments, you should not commit adultery, and you should not steal, and all those things. These are biblical laws. So now, as far as my eating habits and my prayer habits, those are the Sharia law. My eating habits. I don't eat pork. So that's So now, as far as implementing it on other people, I mean, it's for me. It's for me. I don't commit adultery. I don't. I'm not going to enforce that on anyone else.
But you wouldn't support. I mean, when I'm looking on. I just Googled it, so I'm just looking online, and it talks about. I mean, for example, you believe in equality for women and men.
Oh, absolutely. My wife is right here. I mean, see, what you see is like you go to Saudi Arabia and the women can't drive cars, but my wife drives a car. She's right here. I mean, the Muslim women.
Okay, well, we're going to go to your next question. I think you answered the question. Okay, Bev, we're going to go to Bev next. Bev, do you have a question for Gregory Jones?
Yes, whenever I have to fill out a form and they ask for race, I feel like checking them all. But why is there not a place for mixed? And we become mixed in America. And yet some races think they're predominant over others. Some races go with, races that there aren't many of or whatever. And we are getting so mixed in America. And what relationship do these things have with religion, with our faith? They are separate.
Okay, we'll let Greg respond to that. We'll hang up. Okay, Bev. Thank you for the question. All right, Greg, did you hear that question? Would you like to comment on that one?
Yeah. I think what that question brings to my mind is the fallacy of race, or the fallacy of racism. Because if we're all this is sort of like, okay, I guess a lot of people are Christian, some people are Muslim or whatever faith. But if you believe in God, you believe in Adam and Eve, you believe that, or even if you believe in evolution, we all came from, one race of people, the human race. So I think that's what she's saying about, we're all human, of the human race. So the fallacy of, the white race or the black race, black and white don't even really describe the person of their geographic origin, their language, their culture. Those are not good descriptors. So I studied this in college. The fallacy of racism. So that takes more discussion so we can all understand each other. A lot of Americans, whether you're black or white, have Native American blood. And so, but if you get a box and say, okay, I don't have my tribal card, so I can't be, but I have a lot of Cherokee American in me, and does that answer the question?
I think so to some degree. It's probably part of the reason why so many people now believe the time of affirmative action is done, because we are so mixed, and if we're really going to be equal, why are we giving special consideration to special races specifically?
Yeah.
So, that's my question is, if we really are mixed, are we past affirmative action? Is it time for us to get on with being Americans instead of being one race or another?
Well, I think that I would say that racism is not dead, and we do have to be vigilant to ensure that everybody is getting a fair shake. Whatever system, we can give it a different name. We can just make sure that everything is fair.
Well, we appreciate you calling in. We're running up against our hard break again. I know I gave you a lot of time today because I was so excited to have you on. Thank you so much for calling in. And again, folks, that's Gregory Jones. He's running for State House District 8. He's running as a Democrat against Mark Newman, who's a Republican. If you'd like more information, you can contact him at gijonesforhouse.com. Hey, Greg, thanks for calling.
Thank you.
All right, take care. You're listening to the Amy Demboski Show.